Good afternoon. I'm Lori Mattson, President and CEO of the Tri-City Regional Chamber. Thank you for joining us for State of Education, our first virtual luncheon, featuring Washington State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reykdal. Superintendent Reykdal is leading the charge to reopen Washington schools in the fall. Today, he'll address the many challenges that COVID-19 has presented to the education system, as well as plans to ensure that students throughout the state can safely return to schools. Much has changed since our last in-person luncheon in February. Like many of you, the Tri-City Regional Chamber has been forced to pivot from our traditional operations. Since March, the Chamber staff have been working tirelessly to serve our members and to support our community. I wanted to take a few minutes to highlight a few of the impactful activities we've been working on. Before Governor Inslee's Stay Home, Stay Safe order was issued, the Chamber launched the Tri-Cities Open for Business initiative, providing resources for businesses and visibility to members deemed essential. One of the best resources on the Open for Business webpage is the COVID-19 Resource Guide. Updated daily, the guide contains vital information about grants, loans, services, and benefits available to businesses. Additional help is available through our rapid response line. Callers can speak directly with our Government and Regional Affairs Director, Stephanie Swanberg, who will help you navigate through all the information. The Chamber has created and distributed 100 Tri-Cities Open for Business yard signs to generate visibility for businesses that are open. We facilitated nearly a dozen Ask the Experts responding to COVID-19 webinars, reaching nearly 20,000 views on Facebook. You can find information on upcoming webinars on our website. Additionally, the Chamber, along with TriDec and Visit Tri-Cities, launched the Tri-Cities Open and Safe Coalition, a region-wide initiative to protect public health and restore our local economy. Last week, the Open and Safe Coalition held a PPE drive and collected thousands of disposable masks, as well as gallons of hand sanitizer to donate to local businesses. The curbside PPE distribution will be tomorrow, June 25th, and Friday, June 26th, at the Tri-Cities Business and Visitor Center from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Businesses will receive disposable masks, hand sanitizer, and a Tri-Cities Open and Safe window cling to show customers that our local businesses are serious about public health. The PPE provided is on a first-come, first-served basis. Please bring your business card with you to the drive. We want you to know that we're here for you and that we'll all get through this together. The sponsor of today's luncheon is GISA Credit Union. Please help me welcome Angie Brotherton, the Assistant Vice President of Community Relations.
Hello, thank you, Lori. So at GISA, education is the foundation of everything we do. We're lucky to partner with many school districts across the state and right here in the Tri-Cities. Excuse me just a second, sorry about that. Right here as well in the Tri-Cities. And in a moment, I'm going to play a video showcasing some of the milestones we've hit as a credit union, many of those with the help of our school partners. And whenever we can get our members and the community involved in making a difference, we do. And that's what each of you are doing here today. You're helping make an impact simply by joining us this afternoon. In support of InvestEd, GISA is donating $10 per registrant today. InvestEd is one of the state's leading education nonprofits who partners with schools right here in the Tri-Cities and across the state to support students in need. Their mission is simple: get kids to school, get them engaged in school, and get them graduated. InvestEd helps by providing students with funds for items like testing costs, sport and activity fees, tutoring, even clothing and basic needs. And at last check, we were just over 200 registrants, so that's over $2,000 you've helped give back to students in need. Thank you to everyone for supporting InvestEd and the Regional Chamber. A thank you to the Chamber staff for all the hard work in coordinating this event. And thank you to Superintendent Reykdal for being here today. With that, please enjoy a short video highlighting some of the ways GISA gives back in support of education in our state. Thanks.
At GISA Credit Union, financial education is a cornerstone of our community outreach efforts, and we are committed to advancing financial literacy awareness and professional development in communities we serve. We strive to honor this commitment by supporting school districts, clubs, businesses, and other community organizations with innovative education opportunities, including in-person presentations, experiential learning programs, student-ran high school credit unions, and our affinity debit card program. GISA's financial education team has designed custom in-person courses intended to empower members of all ages to be financially savvy. These free education courses are tailored to fit the needs of your organization. Our experiential learning programs offer a unique learning experience as they mirror real-life situations. Whether it's providing students a glimpse of adulthood, empowering adults to achieve the retirement of their dreams, or assisting community members in gaining a better understanding of poverty, these sessions truly leave lasting impacts on participants. We are proud to say this commitment to education reached a new milestone last year, as GISA facilitated over 200 individual education sessions and reached over 12,000 participants. To take education to new heights, we also proudly offer a national award-winning student-ran high school credit union program. Currently located in multiple schools across Washington State, these student-ran campus branches provide real-life financial industry experience to high school students while enabling the student body to learn how to manage their money in a realistic credit union atmosphere. Designed to complement the school's curriculum, this innovative program provides valuable career readiness skills to student tellers through paid internships and sets all students up for financial success as they enter adulthood. GISA Credit Union also offers our members a unique way to support education and positively impact school districts. It's called the Affinity Debit Card Program, and here's how it works. Members can select an exclusively designed debit card for their high school of choice at no charge. This card is linked to their checking account and can be used for daily purchases, just like any other debit card. Seems like a great way to show school pride, right? Well, here's the best part. Each time these cards are swiped, they're actually earning unlimited funds for the school district represented on the card. With the help of our members, last year, GISA awarded participating school districts $155,000. Interested in partnering with GISA to make an even bigger impact on education? Contact GISA today to bring any of these programs to your school district or organization.
Thank you, Angie, and thanks to the entire GISA team for sponsoring today's luncheon, as well as providing that generous donation to Invest Ed. We're fortunate that even during this crisis, businesses are becoming engaged with our organization. I have the pleasure of welcoming the Chamber's newest members. Scout Clean Energy, Dickey's Barbecue Pit, Trevor Fehrenbacher, Financial Advisor Edward Jones, Credit Pros Tri-Cities, Middleton's Fall Festival, Capital Choice Northwest, Spectrum Enterprise, Alliant Employee Benefits, Labor Plus Solutions, Inc., and Showcase Specialties. At this time, we'll recognize the May and June members of the month. Our Awards and Recognition Committee put special thought into selecting these businesses who have done an outstanding job of helping our community during these trying times. I'm honored to announce the committee has chosen The Lodge at Columbia Point as the May member of the month. Not only is the Lodge an amazing destination in the Tri-Cities, they are also extremely community-minded, using their funds from the COVID-19 Paycheck Protection Program to assist a new nonprofit, Grace Kitchen. The Chamber is proud to recognize General Manager Wendy Higgins and her team at the Lodge as the May member of the month. Next, it's my pleasure to announce that our friends at CG Public House and Catering are the recipients of the June member of the month. Hopefully you've all heard or maybe even experienced for yourself, CG has put together innovative drive-through markets. Each week they partner with local vendors, providing an outlet to these small businesses that they wouldn't normally have during phase one. Congratulations, Steve, Shirley, and Kyle Simmons, owners of CG Public House, on being recognized as our June member of the month. Now I'd like to turn things over to Chris Rivard, the chair of our board of directors, to introduce today's speaker and to take us through the remainder of the program.
Thank you, Lori. Great to be with you, and thank you all for joining us for this virtual event. We are very excited to be getting back to some form of normal for the Chamber. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you our guest speaker. Superintendent Chris Reykdal was born and raised in Snohomish, Washington. He has served as a high school history teacher, local school board member, state legislator, and budget and policy executive for our state's community and technical college system. Chris leads a team at OSPI that is dedicated to ensuring all students are provided equitable access to a high-quality public education. Since taking office in January of 2017, Chris has led OSPI through a transformation of the state's accountability and funding systems, a complete redesign of the way the agency shares data with the public, a rebuild of outdated rules to promote equity and student discipline, and an overhaul of the state's graduation requirements so students can choose pathways that are aligned with their goals and interests. Chris holds a bachelor's degree and a teaching certificate from Washington State University. Go Cougs! As well as a master's degree in public administration from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Chris and his wife, Kim, live in Tumwater with their 2 children, Carter and Kennedy. Please help me welcome Chris Reykdal.
Hey everybody, thank you very, very much for jumping on the Zoom. I know we're all getting a little tired of Zooms at this point in this entire crazy process, but this is the world that we live in right now, and it's clearly a global pandemic as other countries around the world are experiencing what we have. At the peak of this, 1.6 billion kids around the world were not in traditional school, and it's about 53 million American kids in all 50 states. So I certainly get a lot of folks who say, like, tell us the metrics of this. How big did this get? And it was global and it was significant. And quite frankly, almost everybody is still out. There's about a dozen or so countries that we are pretty competitive with, mostly on the Pacific Rim, that have tried to return. Some of them have already re-shut down, but we're learning a lot from them. So the nature of my remarks today are really kind of a recap of where we've been. Definitely some understanding about what's possible this fall, because we do have a pretty good framework here to give us a pretty good opportunity this fall. We'll talk about that. And then some questions came in. And so I was asked to read the question and get some answers. And it's coming from membership here of your organization. Thanks to Giza, by the way. Our financial institutions, particularly credit unions, just do an amazing job partnering locally on financial literacy. And in fact, there's a question a little later about that we'll talk about. But it's been a real statewide effort over the last several years to build financial literacy with our students, and it's going well, and it's a pretty amazing opportunity, I think, to do what I call making quantitative reasoning come to life. We do a lot of academic math and education, and it serves a lot of students well, but most students need a significant grounding in quantitative reasoning and analytics and financial literacy that allows them to empower their lives and live daily lives and be financially responsible. So it's been really dialed up lately. Okay, where have we been? My goodness, who would have known that back in March, in the beginning of March, that 2 weeks into it, we closed down schools, we'd shut down the state, effectively shut down the economy, really have a national closure in some ways before things opened up, and do just remarkable economic impact to everything. So here we sit now about 10 weeks, 11 weeks or so from our traditional opening this September. And in the meantime, we've closed down schools. We went online to the extent possible. Districts had really different experiences in that based on how they were positioned in terms of resources, connectivity for families, and really whether they had established a framework for this kind of thing. Very few did around the country. We had a couple of real shining star districts in this state who made the tradition of the switch immediately with great success, and then others who really struggled with it in the beginning, but we built competency around the state. What we know is a lot of students, probably 15 or 20%, report that they didn't have a reliable enough connection or any connection to really have that be an effective system. So that was because maybe they didn't have high speed, maybe they had a device, but they didn't have the ability to have multiple family members share it. Perhaps mom and dad were also at home trying to work from home. Everyone was using bandwidth. Everyone was trying to compete for devices in the home. Or in some cases, just quite literally, we have families that can't afford the hardware, nor do they have the connectivity, and are very, very rural in some cases and remote. And so for them, a lot of them got homework packets, paper packets. Our schools delivered millions and millions of meals during this time, tried to keep that basic nutrition going on. And of course, we opened up 7,000 childcare slots around the state in our schools with about a 4,000 to 5,000 peak take up on that. That's an entire another chamber conversation that I think is really powerful. This economic impact to early childhood ed providers and the daycare providers has been significant. Most of those are small business owners. And when everyone was sent home from work, It didn't make a lot of sense to spend $400, $600, $800, $1,000 a month on childcare to a third party, and a lot of folks pulled their kids out. Well, that really impacted those businesses. So everything I'll talk about today is really K-12 public ed and kind of where we're going. But please keep in mind that there's an entire rebuilding process that I think has to occur for that non-basic education stuff, the birth to 5 supports for kids, that is not only powerful for their learning, but it really underwrites our economy. What empowers the labor force really to get to work in this country is that we send, 55 million young people to school every day, 62, 63 million if you consider daycares. It's an enormous economic opportunity to get safe, effective learning for kids and care while parents are earning income, and we've got to rebuild that. We've got to get back to that. So let's talk a little bit about what the plan is. We've been working hard with the Department of Health and Labor and Industries. Many of you are very familiar with L&I because they are really our regulator around workplace safety for the adults in our system. We're typically like slips and falls and the occasional maintenance worker risk in our system, and suddenly we're on their radar big time because you've got this virus that if we can return back to school has people in close proximity. So we've not had a long tradition in K-12 of a lot of rich contact with L&I like some of you in your businesses, but we're sure there now, and every district's thinking about that stuff now. But as we convene those partners and the governor's office, our goal was a couple things. Number one, we wanted the possibility of opening schools this fall in a face-to-face environment to the maximum extent possible, provided we were not in some serious, significant, high-scale event like we saw ourselves in March. Jury's still out on that, right? It's going really well in some counties. We're seeing a deterioration in other counties, and we'll talk a bit more about that. So our goal is not to have it be a function of phases. I got to be honest with you. I think a lot of people were confused around whether their county was in a phase 1 or a phase 2 or phase 3. Some of you are still battling that a little bit. For those of us that work in this business, we've got dozens of school districts that straddle county. And so it didn't make a lot of sense to say part of your district's in phase 2 and another part of your district is in a different county in phase 3. So we asked the governor and these regulators to give us a universal opportunity to open school face to face. So rather than make it about counties, they made it about the conditions we have to meet. There are really 5 big ones, and they're dominating. I'd say 2 of them are really dominating headlines, and it's really creating a collision, I think, of values and culture. I think it's a larger cultural war, if you will, that's happening in the country. But the face covering one is a big one, so let's talk about them. First thing Department of Health has us do is really screening, universal screening. They point to the CDC guidance still, and they say if you're coming back this summer or this fall, you got to either screen on site as students come to the school, or you got to have an attestation process, something parents can do at home, including a thermal scan or temperature check, and either digitally say, yep, good to go, my kid's headed to school, or some districts will give out coupons and the family will fill it out and sign it every morning, and the kid to get into first period or into the first class if they're in elementary will hand it over and say, yep, I've had a check. Kid comes to school without it, of course, no problem, we'll do a screening there on site. But DOH says everyone's screening every morning. Second one, of course, is cleaning. So you're screening and cleaning. Very regimented cleaning routine in our schools, on our buses, in our cafeterias, all of our facilities, including playgrounds. The third one that's really important, of course, to the regulators here is social distancing. So it's very, very important in the science that the framework be 6 feet. And that's really problematic, and I want to spend some time on it. 6 feet is the scientific kind of maximum radius of a sneeze or a cough. Much further in choir, for example, if you're singing, it turns out that those droplets can go quite a bit further when you're breathing from the diaphragm and really belting it out. But typical movement, sneeze, cough, talk, speech, is a 3 to 6 foot droplet. And so the Department of Health has said they want our facilities to plan for 6 feet. And the way I describe it is, imagine the bell rings in the morning and everyone's where they're supposed to be. When they plop their seats down, they need to be 6 feet apart. But what the DOH has been pretty flexible on is to understand that that's not practical in terms of a daily movement. They're not saying every single moment has to be 6 feet. They know kids are going to pass in hallways, and they know that the teacher needs to move around, and that kids are going to go get a drink at the fountain, or they're going to get to a whiteboard or something. So it's not an audit thing. We're not running around looking for 6 feet, but we have to plan as if we're doing that. The Department of Health has a scientific basis about a duration too, and we didn't put it in guidance because it's a little too loosey-goosey, but generally speaking, that 6 foot is about not really violating it for more than 15 minutes at a time. They don't want people in close proximity for any length of time. And so they have a 6-foot planning framework, which is tough. They've made an exception for buses. We cannot run the business model of schools if we can't get kids there, and kids don't get access to their basic civil rights and education unless they can get to school. And so buses are one place they've made an exception. Why? Because all those other protective factors are there. The cleaning, the screening, the face coverings, which we'll talk about, the hand hygiene. They know that most bus trips are much shorter in duration than a 6-hour school day where you're right next to each other. So really, really steadfast 6-foot planning framework that DOH has set up with some exceptions, obviously. And clearly buses are a place they're giving us some flexibility to make sure kids get to school and back. The other big one for them, of course, is hand hygiene. So we're washing our hands all the time, and that's just good practice no matter what. It really is for all of us. I just remind everybody that as a disease of droplets, it's the spreading of our droplets that puts a potentially infectious virus in play. Even if we are apparently asymptomatic, we can spread it. But it's actually the touching of it, either on a mucous membrane or our hands, and then touching our faces or our mouth or something, that gives it to us. So hand hygiene is very much about your protection. When you wash your hands regularly and you do good screening and you distance from people, you're protecting yourself. But the last element of all this is face coverings, and it's the most controversial, because with face coverings, you're essentially blocking the ability for your sneeze, cough, speech, etc., to send droplets out into the environment to infect others. The mask or the face covering is really the major element of protecting other people. It's the most communal of all of the protection factors. And the Department of Health is requiring it in our schools if we're going to open this fall. There are clear exceptions for students who cannot medically have it, those who could not take it off in an emergency. And they've made clear that a face shield, like a clear plexiglass shield, can be used for students as a replacement to a cloth face covering. We've also worked with L&I in the last couple of days to make sure that they flexed up their rules. So not only the students, but our teachers can now choose between a cloth face covering or a clear plastic shield for instructional purpose, for teaching and learning. There are most times when students need to see the mouth of their teacher. There's speech going on, there's language going on, there's understanding that goes on. It is a very different experience, as you might imagine, if I were doing this the entire time like this. It's a totally muffled experience if it goes that route. And so L&I has seen through that and understood that we need to give teachers the opportunity to really be heard more effectively. Students are building synoptics. They're really mapping their brain in early language, in particular based on sound, and connecting that visually to the way the mouth moves. There's a ton of science in reading and in language. So it's open to everybody. So your high school social studies teacher, your high school English teacher, your high school art teacher can also wear this thing for instructional purposes. So we're screening, we're cleaning, we have hand hygiene, we have face coverings, and we've got physical distancing. That's the framework to open this fall. Here's the problem. At 6 feet of distance, you need just under 28 square foot in a radius to make sure that each student is ultimately got 3 feet, and then the next student has 3 feet to create the 6 foot of distance. So it is really tough to map out our floor space in our classrooms and accommodate our traditional loads, 28, 30, 32s. That's not going to happen. You're talking 24s and 23s if you have all your square footage available. If you've got 24, 30-inch counter depth activities going on, if you're in a science lab where 2 or 3 walls are covered in lab equipment and cabinetry, you're talking about far fewer than that, 12, 14, maybe 15 students. And so our districts are under an enormous amount of pressure right now to create as much face-to-face opening opportunity as they can, knowing that in many places they won't be able to bring back every student every day. So what's that going to look like? We see districts saying they're going to prioritize kindergarten through 6th grade because that's really a combination of those students needing lots of support in the early trajectory of their learning. And it happens to be the hardest age group for parents to feel comfortable going to work and leaving at home or with a caregiver. So it serves a double purpose when districts really focus on K-6 or K-8 and leave more of the high school instruction, if they must, to an online model or a blended model where the students are coming in perhaps every other day or partial days every day, but some of their learning is an expectation at a distance. This is what it's going to take. And I wish it were different, but Department of Health and L&I absolutely control the health side of this thing. What we do is try to support districts and give them confidence that their cash flow is there in order to pay their staff for this remarkably different effort. We make sure that they understand some teaching and learning expectations that we have, that we're supporting them and getting their minutes and hours and days of instruction in. And in some ways, we're trying to continue to take down barriers that are perfectly logical in normal times, but may not make sense now when we can't do a traditional, full throttle face-to-face experience with every kid. But that's really the framework, and that's the opportunity. It's not tied to phases, but the governor really wanted to make sure that folks knew in our guidance that obviously if things are not going well, he always has the authority to close again. I don't expect that. But he also wants to remind everyone that your local health department has very clear statutory rights over public health, including our schools. So even if the school feels totally prepared, if things really regress in a community, then local public health could either add additional protections that they expect or unfortunately, potentially close down. People ask all the time, what happens? We're gonna have COVID cases. Does this mean big shutdowns again? And the answer is not necessarily. The contact tracing has gotten so much better because we have multiple protections. We're cleaning, we're screening, we have hand hygiene, we have face coverings, and we're keeping 6 feet apart. The probability of spread in our schools becomes very, very low. And the health authorities believe that they can do the contact tracing much more effectively and rapidly. So you might see shorter term closures in the fall, assuming we don't have a big community outbreak. But we would expect to close down, get some tracing done, and then be back. And not even whole districts, just one facility potentially, or potentially even one classroom if they feel like they have it contained and isolated. A lot of unknowns. Again, we're 10 or 11 weeks away. I'd have you remember where we were 10 or 11 weeks ago. We had no concept of how big this would get, both from a public health standpoint or an economic standpoint. So there's a lot here that can change. I observe that the governor has now ordered all of us in our public lives to wear face coverings. It is such a significant way to protect. And I observed that the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, are now essentially forcing quarantine of travelers from 10 or 11 other states if you go to that area. And so now you're seeing individual states beginning to look so insular on themselves that they're going to start impacting commerce again because they're going to restrict travel essentially from other states. So whether we like it or not, we have a responsibility to each other, as in one state to another, and we have a responsibility to each other here. I know the face covering thing is tough. I really do, because people have this sense of liberty about it and a conviction that government ought not control what we wear or what we do. And I do respect that. This is a once in a 100-year pandemic, and the science is so clear about our spacing and about our face covering that if we do it well, I think we have a great opportunity to open schools. Okay, let's get to a couple questions. I think we've covered a lot of sort of the framework of this, but I'm actually going to start with Melissa from Community First Bank. She's got a series of questions. I'm going to ask them sort of one at a time, make sure you hear it, and then I'll answer it. If counties have not progressed through the 4 phases of Inslee's Safe Start Plan, will that impact the local district's ability to do any form of in-person teaching? If so, how? Is that considered equitable to students in those districts, particularly high agricultural workforce communities? So thank you, Melissa. Again, it's not a function of the phases, which is good. We didn't think it made a lot of sense to say you can do something different in 2 versus 3. Basic education in the state of Washington is our paramount duty. It's the strongest constitutional provision of any of the 50 states, and we wanted to create an opportunity for learning no matter what. So it does not matter what phase you're in, schools have an opportunity. Again, if you're in phase 1 or modified phase 1, or if you're regressing backwards, we just have to remember that your local public health can always take additional action. But at this point, our opening is an opportunity regardless of phase. I would remind everybody that phase 4 is still really clear that we're still socially distancing or physically distancing and wearing face coverings and doing hygiene in phase 4. It's actually only when we get a virus protection, when we get sort of a full vaccine at scale, that we're going to be able to lift all that stuff up. So even if we got a vaccine and only 50% of Washingtonians said they're going to get it, this is significantly more transmissive than even seasonal flu, and so much more deadly that unfortunately the health experts tell us we got to get a vaccine and then at scale before we totally return to normal. They do not expect any of our counties reasonably to be in phase 4 anytime soon. So jury's out there. If counties have not progressed through the 4 phases, will OSPI and or WIAA allow student athletes from those local districts to compete, possibly with increased monitoring contingency plans? What about other extracurricular activities? This is an awesome question. I'm going to remind all of you, I am the superintendent of public instruction. That word has meaning. It's teaching and learning of core content and enrichment content. It is not athletics. So there's a separate nonprofit association that controls that. They too have worked their guidance through the Department of Health. This week they've just released it. Because they're a nonprofit organization that are not exactly directly tied to us, they follow the phasing approach of the county, the governor's sort of Safe Start plan. So it's a little bit different framework, but super consistent in terms of protections, enormous attention on the equipment since kids are touching the same piece of equipment multiple times, lots of physical distancing, no sharing of water bottles. Because it's in phases, athletics is very much like current recreational guidance from the governor, which is very little individualized work in phase 1, like less than 5 or 10 in phase 2, 50 in phase 3, and then phase 4, of course, bigger opportunities. I really cannot assess for you what leagues are going to look like this year. Given that we've kind of hit a plateau here a little bit, I think it's going to be tough for leagues to be full blown, but there's a capacity for that in the WIAA guidance. What I can tell you is we too want athletics to go forward. So we worked hard with the governor's office to say when we open schools and we get prepared for that this summer, we want all of the things that come with schools to be an opportunity as well. We'll follow the safe guidelines, but athletics, theater, arts, music, this is core to success for a lot of our students, and it creates that holistic experience of learning and community. And again, I could take you into the brain science and early art, what art does for kids and creativity. It's pretty powerful, and it's not something that we should treat as sort of ancillary. It is core to our learning. So that's it on athletics, really challenging. I try not to answer questions about athletics. I don't have any guidance for you, whether you're football or cross country family. I'm a soccer family, so I'm sort of right in between, a lot of running and occasional contact. I would guess we're not going to be in huddles this fall. That would be my guess if you're a football family. So maybe we need earpieces for every kid to call signals or something. If a district chooses K3 or K5 in person and has secondary students being more at a distance from online, how is that fair? How is that equitable? What about students who really need high touch services like CTE and other things? This will be up to local districts. So our planning framework gives them an opportunity to return face-to-face to the maximum extent they can given the physical distancing guidelines. There are districts who want to focus their limited space on K6, K5, maybe K8. Many of them are going to get everyone to school every other day or perhaps part of each day. They're all figuring out something that makes sense for their community. Part of what we did here is put a responsibility on our amazing school boards. These are locally elected officials by you all, and they really should have the biggest voice in this. They are the representatives to local voters about their schools, and so they will actually be adopting their plans. We will not approve or disapprove plans here at OSPI. Local districts will adopt plans. There will be a template so they know what rules they have to follow from health and L&I and anything that we have in there. But it's really just a template, and districts make this choice. They'll go through a public process adopted by the school boards, and then it will be on file with us so that we have universal access to these plans from anyone who asks for it. Parents, families, community members, media, both statewide or local media. So really focus on your local community at this point. If you're kind of wondering how that plan is going to go, maybe what preferences they have, a lot of it's how they optimize their buildings. Some of you have tons of square footage and you can do this. Maybe you run out of teachers though once you have to reduce size and spread out. Others are totally crammed and jammed, and there's simply no way they can get everyone in. So work with your local district. You've got lots in the area, but you've got the big three who are really, really good, and they have amazing leadership. And congratulations to Shelly. She's probably not on the call yet, but she's coming back to the Tri-Cities. A lot of you know her from her prior work there. She's leaving Spokane, jumping the Richland job, and really happy for you all because she's a really amazing superintendent with great skills. And so now you've got three awesome leaders in the community. Okay, do you foresee a scenario where schools will be completely shuttered statewide again? I do not. We've learned a lot about the virus. We obviously have learned, and when I say we, I've got the school angle of this, but the governor's got the big decision. He's the one who decides about closures at the statewide level. You saw him try to reintroduce, after a lot of listening by communities, to be differential in treatment. Rural communities didn't get hit hard the same way. And even if their cases per thousand are higher than some areas, they're more remote, they're more distant, they're more socially distanced, right? All the stuff you want. in virus protection. So I would not expect a statewide closure again. But it's going to be tough if we don't kind of do our role here. If things really did get out of control again, the governor may not feel that equity can be met. Tough call, right? Everyone's entitled to a basic ed, and what we learned last time is it's not so great to be at a distance if you're not connected. And so I think we've learned a lot about that. The other thing I'd say is districts are going through a tremendous planning effort. They've deployed more devices, more connectivity. They're doing professional development for their staff. And as part of our requirements and mandates and guidance to them, they've got to have a plan that they submit to their board and pass and have on file with us that also calls for a parallel scenario where they have to open at a distance or maybe shift to it in the case of a building closure like we talked about earlier and where cases break out in a facility. And so our districts are significantly better prepared for this fall at a distance than they were when they had to shut down, sometimes literally within 48 hours. Or 72 hours. And so I think we're going to be a lot better at this. We've learned a lot. We would love to invest some resources here at the state, and I'll talk about them in a minute, to do statewide professional development so our educators are better at teaching online. There needs to be fewer learning management systems. Some of you had kids who went home and 4 or 5 different teachers had 4 or 5 different ways to communicate with students. And we want that significantly streamlined in each district. Again, we don't say what the platform is, local control, but they really should have at least one per grade band. You should not have 3 or 4 different platforms in a particular high school. You should get that down to one to the extent that that's possible. Okay, a couple other questions here. Lupe with Communities and Schools basically asks, how can communities and schools, which focus on attendance, behavior, grades, graduation for students, while addressing social determinants of health, how can they take a stronger position and partner with OSPI by creating educational systems of change? How can they be a bigger influencer of this? Communities and schools is an amazing focus here. It really is this idea that rather than having some families, some students, and some services have to be navigated through multiple places in a region or a county, bring as much of that centrally as you can, particularly to families and students who need so much support. We had tremendous success, parts of the Tri-Cities, the Vancouver area, the Bellingham area, really successful models here. I have a twofold answer to that. One is we'd love to partner with you further. There's a little bit of resource here right now, but we have this CARES Act dollars, this federal money that came to our state. 90% is supposed to go out to school districts, and almost all of that has been approved by the Office of Financial Management. But about 10% of that was going to be set aside for the state education agency, my office, and that was federally required. But our Office of Financial Management hasn't released our share of that. Our goal with that money, and it was about $22 million here, was to do community-based grants. We wanted local nonprofit organizations, things like communities and schools, to be able to access those through competitive grants so that they could really build out these supports for families. We think getting all of this money as local as possible is the best thing to do. We had 2 other priorities too, by the way. The other one was purchasing connectivity for low-income families for the next year, assuming that part of their learning will probably be online in part. And then the second one was doing the professional development of our teachers, right? Having these statewide platforms that really create consistency and deployment on online learning management systems. Some of you know them as Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams or Schoology or Canvas. We wanted 4 or 5 of these that really had a great volume, great scale that we could train on. None of those dollars have been released, so we're really pushing OFM to get those dollars released so we can do some of that work. Megan with the Children's Reading Foundation says, as someone that runs a volunteer program to help students meet their educational requirements for local elementary schools, what does volunteering in schools look like next year? Will we be able to do the work with students one-on-one in their schools? So what are these programs going to look like? It's an awesome question, Megan. We think you can. School districts, of course, are under these same health frameworks for their guests. The health world really wants you to limit the outside folks who come in. They don't want all of that risk of virus spread for anyone who may be infected or asymptomatic and containing the virus. But these programs can move forward. They're an essential part of success in school. But you'll go through the same screening process, face coverings, hand hygiene, all of that. What districts will have to really kind of figure out is just how to really schedule that so that it allows that high-touch service. And by high-touch, I mean a lot of times these folks are close to students in reading. So they're reading to them or they're listening to students. They're working one-on-one. They're building their reading skills We have targeted dollars that support a lot of this. We call them learning assistance program dollars in some cases. The key is that we can't be right in each other's faces for a half hour, an hour at a time. So it might be that we're socially distant or physically distant, but maybe some intensive work. There's a method of reading that some teachers teach kids, and so you may have to demonstrate that, but then, you know, wash hands or get away. It's this sustained time together that health officials don't want us to do. So each school district will make that choice. That opportunity is there for them, but they'll have to be super careful about doing it within the health parameters. Finally, Cliff with Red Lion Hotel says, Washington's ranked near the bottom. It says bottom 5 states on teaching financial literacy. Other states have been proactive in helping to prepare teens for life activities, balancing checkbooks, knowing the difference between simple and compounding interest, understanding mortgages, loans, retirements, all of that. What can we do to expand financial literacy in our schools? Very good news here, Cliff. Our state a couple years ago finally adopted our standards for financial literacy. They're kindergarten through 12th grade. So there's a framework here at OSPI that any school district can come and say, if I really wanted an age appropriate standard by grade level, and I wanted to build a program in my district to get kids financially literate, we have resources for them. We have a professional here in a public-private partnership that works with districts to not only get them resources, but to help them understand our learning framework. We're seeing it really grow across the state. I will tell you, and perhaps you won't all agree with me, but I think our third credit of math for many students should be flexed up to really focus that third credit after algebra and geometry on financial literacy. A lot of students would be well served by accounting. Some of them would be extremely well served by statistics. Not every student needs that Algebra 2 calculus route because, again, only about a third of our students will head to a university. About another third will go to a community or technical college, but most of their majors won't require academic high-level math. That leaves like a third to a half of our students who really need quantitative reasoning and financial literacy, and not necessarily the university for all stuff. And so we think students should have choices, and I think you should look forward to a robust discussion in the legislature over the next year or two on how to flex up the third credit of math to be more applied to the student's pathway interest. You've got some amazing labor management partnerships in the Tri-Cities. You've heard me say this because I've spoken to you before, and I'm not just blowing smoke at you. I say it in Seattle and I say it everywhere else. No one does it better than the Tri-Cities. Your labor management relationships are very, very good. And what I think makes it work is something like what I just described, where labor says, we absolutely want quantitative reasoning and advanced math skills. It doesn't have to be academic. We want welders and sheet metal workers and folks who work in all kinds of industries to have mathematical skills that they apply to the job. And that's the goal. That's how we moved to a pathway system in the last 2 years under my leadership. And that's what I'm going to keep building out, multiple pathways for students. That's what I've got. That's the race through your lunch hour. Some of you are still eating. Some of you want to get outside. It's getting warm. I will stop. There may be other questions. I don't know if you're facilitating other questions, but I got through the list that you all sent me. I'm incredibly grateful for the time. I know you're all zoomed out. So am I. I did a 13-half-hour day yesterday, finished at 9:30 last night with my last call. I'm ready to see you all face to face when it is safe and healthy. I cannot wait to get back there and see you all so we can get away from this madness. Till then, wash your hands, wear your face coverings, stay physically distant. Let's do it for each other. Back to you all.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Reykdal, for speaking with us today. We really appreciate you taking the time away from your very busy schedule and challenging work to present to the Tri-Cities business community. So it wouldn't be a chamber luncheon without door prizes. Today's sponsor, GISA, has provided us with 2 gift baskets. One is a family fun pack with candy, popcorn, board games, and some gift certificates. And the other is a Girl Scout cookie basket with every type of Girl Scout cookie and some cool GISA swag as well. So some names were randomly drawn prior to the start of our program today, and congratulations to Christy Farger and Gretel Crawford, who's Elizabeth Holt from the Chamber will reach out to the both of you and give you some instruction on how you can collect your prize. Before we wrap up, I would like to thank GISA Credit Union for being our sponsor of today's virtual luncheon, Superintendent Reykdal for speaking with us, and all of you for attending our first ever virtual luncheon. Not our last. Our next virtual luncheon in the summer 2020 luncheon series is the State of the Cities, which will be on July 22nd. Presenting on behalf of their cities will be the mayors of Kennewick, Pasco, Richland, and West Richland, and registration for that will be opening soon. Also, today's luncheon will be posted on the Chamber's YouTube page and shared on Facebook. Please send the link to anyone you feel could benefit from today's presentation. One final reminder about the PPE distribution for businesses. The event is tomorrow, June 25th, and Friday, June 26th at the Tri-Cities Business and Visitor Center from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And remember to bring your business cards. That's the only way that they'll allow you in to the drive. Lastly, the Tri-City Regional Chamber asks that we all do our part to help our region get to phase 2. We all want to get back. Please wear a facial covering when in public and follow the guidelines outlined by the Benton Franklin Health District. We can and should do better, Tri-Cities.